Fold a piece of paper into a crane for the first time, and you'll botch it. One wing longer than the other. A crease where there shouldn't be one. The kind of thing a stranger would toss without a second look, or hand you a nickel for, if they were feeling generous. But you won't toss it. You'll keep your crooked little bird. And if you're being honest, part of you thinks it's worth more than a perfect one folded by an expert. So why does something you made badly feel more valuable than the same thing made better by someone else? In 2011, researchers at Harvard, Duke, and Tulane ran a simple experiment. They sat a group of people down and gave them one task, which was to fold a piece of paper into a frog or a crane. There was no training and no practice involved. They just gave them instructions and a square of paper. The results were exactly what you would expect from a room full of novices. The work was lopsided, uneven, and objectively amateur. Then they held an auction where the makers bid on their own creations. Strangers who hadn't folded anything bid on that same novice work, while a separate group of strangers bid on origami folded by actual experts. Every bid came back in pennies. Makers bid an average of 23 cents for their own crooked frogs. Strangers looked at those same frogs and offered 5 cents. But for the expert origami that was clean and professional, those same strangers bid 27 cents. 4 cents apart. The maker valued a lopsided, first-try crane almost exactly as high as a master's finished work. This is what researchers call the IKEA effect. Completed labor makes you value a self-made object far beyond what it's actually worth. The name comes from the furniture company, but the mechanism has nothing to do with Allen keys or particle board. It's about what happens inside the person who builds the thing. A second experiment made the same point with something even less personal, which was a plain black storage box. One group assembled it from scratch, while another group was handed an identical, pre-assembled box to inspect. When both groups were asked what the box was worth, the builders bid higher. It was the same box and the same materials, so the only difference was who put it together. Then they added a third group, people who started building the same box but were stopped before they could finish. Asked what that half-assembled box was worth, the value bump nearly disappeared. So it isn't just the effort. You can pour an hour into something and walk away with nothing, because the labor only pays off at the moment it's finished. The value lives at the finish line, and nowhere before it. When you look at something you finished making, the object barely matters. What you're really looking at is evidence, proof you set out to do something and actually made it happen. The researchers connect this to a concept called effectance, a deep, persistent need to see a direct line between what we do and what happens in the world. We don't just want to own things, we want to cause them, to push something and watch it move because we were the one who pushed. That need shows up early. Infants will repeat an action that visibly works, not because the result is interesting, but because the causing works. The cause and effect loop is the reward, and we never really outgrow that drive. We just find more complicated things to build to satisfy the same urge. Finish assembling a shelf, a model, even a meal, and the object becomes proof you still have that power. You made a specific outcome exist in the world. So, the shelf stops being a place for your books and becomes a receipt for your own competence. An outsider never got that receipt, so they're only pricing the wood and the screws. It's tempting to call this the sunk cost fallacy. You spent the time, so you've talked yourself into thinking the result was worth the trouble. But the two run in opposite directions. Sunk cost is loss aversion. You keep going because you can't stand wasting what you already spent. It's backward looking, and it traps you in a bad investment. Completion does the reverse. It produces something forward-facing, a small, concrete proof that you can actually do things. The sunk cost person is dodging the feeling of wasted effort. The maker is registering that the effort worked. The Lego experiment from this same study series rolls out the rest of the suspects. Some people built a small set. Some were handed an identical finished one to keep. And some built a set, only to take it apart again. The builders valued theirs the most. Simply owning the finished object didn't create the lift, and neither did handling it. And a set you built yourself did nothing if it didn't stay built, right back to that same finish line. Not the effort, not the ownership, the finishing. So, customization isn't the answer here either. The storage boxes used in these experiments weren't personalized in any way, and nobody painted them or carved their initials into the side. They were plain, identical, and utilitarian boxes where the only variable was whether the person's own hands finished the job. But the same instinct that inflates the value has a blind spot. Because you are valuing the evidence of your own agency, you stop seeing the thing you actually made. The competence signal drowns out the quality signal, whether it's a business plan, a garden, or a home renovation. You see what it proves about you, while everyone else just sees the crooked neck on the crane. That's why the gap feels so personal. You show someone what you built. They don't react the way you hoped, and it stings like a failure to appreciate your work. But they aren't missing the value. They just weren't in the room when the receipt was written, so to them, it stays unreadable. That receipt is getting harder to come by. Most of what we use now arrives pre-built and black-boxed, assembled by processes we never see or touch. So when you do get to finish something with your own hands, the payoff runs sharper than the task should earn. It hands back something we're short on, proof we still have some say over physical outcomes. That isn't a design trick or a clever marketing insight. It's just what people are actually doing when they spend a Saturday afternoon fighting with a flat pack instructions sheet. They feel unreasonably satisfied when it's done because they've proven they can still manipulate the world. The crooked little crane is still sitting there. The outsider sees the uneven wings and prices it at a few cents, but the maker sees the exact moment the last fold held. That's what won't let them throw it away. We tend to treat biases like the IKEA effect as bugs to be fixed. This one is doing a job. It's the engine that keeps people building at all. Without that internal reward, finishing something would feel no different from leaving it half done. That outsized pride you feel in something you built isn't a misjudgment of the object. It's an accurate reading of something else entirely, what it proves about you. Two different measurements. They were never going to agree.